Hey, I got an old song. Maybe some of you might like to help me sing it. I'm going to ask my grandson, Tal Rodriguez, to come up here and help me. Where have all the flowers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the flowers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the flowers gone? Girls have picked them, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the young girls gone? Long time passing. Where have all the young girls gone? Long time ago. Where have all the young girls gone? Taken husbands, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the young men gone? Long time passing. Where have all the young men gone? Long time ago. Where have all the young gone? The soldiers, the soldiers, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the soldiers gone? To graveyards? Gone to graveyards, everyone.
You're listening to WSB here at Stony Brook. I believe I have Ray McGovern on the phone. Ray? Raymond.
How are you, Mort?
Recovering slowly. The president isn't helping. Ray, you're a former CIA analyst, and your expertise is the Soviet policy towards China and Vietnam. And how long were you an analyst for the CIA?
Well, I was 27 years as a CIA analyst. Before that, I was a Army officer of infantry and intelligence. So combined, it's about 30 years more.
Okay. Also, you with a group called Tell the Word. You want to tell us something about that?
Sure, yeah. That's a ministry, actually, of the Ecumenical Church of the Savior in inner city Washington. They think that the function of church should be to try to spread some truth around.
Mm-hmm.
So they persuaded me that not only should I continue to do that, but that they would try to help my finances by helping me travel around and do that kind of thing on two conditions, on one condition, actually, and that is that I identify myself with Tell the Word and the church and my byline. And when I asked them, I said, that's great. I would love to do that, but what's in that? What's in that for you? The answer came through loud and clear, Mort. You don't believe this. First, two-part answer. Number one, Ray, this is what church should be doing. And number two, when they come for you, Ray, we want it to be so that they'll have to come for all of us. So I said, sign me up. I've been doing that for a decade now. Even before that, I was writing about things like Iraq and the rest. So my academic degrees are in Russian studies, but over the last 12 years, I've been majoring in administration deceit from Colin Powell to Barack Obama.
Okay. They did come for you. You made the papers recently. You were at, what was it, 92nd Street Y, trying to get in to ask Petraeus some questions?
Yeah, Mort, this is surreal. I was in New York. I come to New York City any chance I get. That's where I spent my first 23 years, and I still love the place. Anyhow, I was up at Fordham, my alma mater, and Manhattan College, teaching on the afternoon of 30 October, and I heard, after all those arrangements had been made, that General Petraeus was going to speak at this 92nd Street Y. Now, I said, well, gosh, that's that same evening. This is a natural. I need to go and listen to hear what he says. I mean, I want to just kind of see how he explains everything to us now, given how Iraq and Afghanistan have gone down the drain. So I thought I was being clever. More, what I did was I said, with all these lists and so forth, if McGovern orders a ticket to the 92nd Street Y to hear Petraeus, I might not get a ticket. So I asked a friend in New York, give me a ticket and I'll pay you the $50. So I come to the 92nd Street Y on the evening of 30 October. It's about after 7. Events at 7:30. And as soon as I mount the steps and get inside the vestibule there, I hear, Ray, you're not welcome here. Really? You're not going to be allowed in. And I said, wait a second, who are you? Chief of Security, 92nd Street. Why? I said, well, you sure? You look more like a New York Giants reject. Are you sure? Yeah, I am. He says, so I said, well, look, I have this ticket, see, and it says you have to let me in.
Oh.
No, you don't. Look at the back of the ticket. It says I can refuse the entry anytime I want. So this is a ticket that I printed off. I printed off the web, and I looked at the back. Of course, it was blank. I said, well, that's not on my ticket. And so I made a move to get in. Five burly New York Giants rejects between me and the turnstile, and everybody else was waiting to get in, So they said, you got to leave. I said, well, wait a second now. I got that. And before I knew it, the NYPD, which had been sort of, retained for just such an eventuality, grabbed me, tried to cuff me, but I have a bad shoulder, fractured, and they couldn't get my left arm around to put the cuffs on, and you know what it's like. Anyhow, it was very painful, so I'm screaming, and so finally the solution they came upon was to string a couple of handcuffs together so that they could tie my left wrist to my right wrist. They put me in the patrol car, took me down 18th Street, 19th Precinct, and booked me and all that kind of stuff. Then the good cop came in and tried to tell me, well, Mr. McGovern, we don't usually like to keep people like you overnight, but you've been charged with very serious offenses, resisting arrest and criminal trespass. So you're going to be in the Tombs tonight. Sorry about that. So I say, well, listen, my shoulder is really, really hurting. Can you get me some doctors? We'll take you to NYU Cornell ER. I said, all right, good. I want to get this X-ray. So that happens, and we get back from that about 3 o'clock, and they take me down to the bottom of the bottom there on 100 Center Street, Lower Manhattan, and there I experienced what happens to people, which I recommend. More all kidding aside, I think everyone should spend at least one night and see what they do to people. Do to people who are guilty of misdemeanors like drinking in public, like, homeless people drinking a beer in public, people who are, in the wrong place at the wrong time. Anyhow, I was in with those people, and I could see how justice or injustice is being arranged in that part of New York. Every now and then one of these white cops would come up to me and say, "You don't belong here, you don't belong here." And I look them straight in the face and say, "No, I belong here. These are my brothers here. This is where I belong. What are you doing? What are you doing on the other side of the building here? What's your role?" It just really was my eye-opening example. Dostoevsky, has said, wrote that if you want to measure the degree of civilization that a country has, look at its prisons. And I have to tell you, that's why I suggest that you don't have to get yourself fractured, but if you end up at the bowels of 100 Center Street overnight, you will be able to have a personal experience with innocent suffering that no book or no speech can tell you about. Anyhow, they didn't give us anything to eat, no place to sleep. I was exhausted by the time it came to be 10 o'clock, and they brought us up to the judge. A pro bono attorney was arranged for me by my Catholic worker friends downtown, and she was terrific. We stood at the docket there, and there I am with my arm in a sling, and the judge wondering what this old guy has he been drinking in public or what. Anyhow, guess what? They let me go on my own recognizance, and I have to go back to answer those serious charges, criminal trespass, and resisting arrest on the 8th of December, same place. So I don't know what's going to happen to me, but it was such an egregious example of what I've just read about that I actually am honest in saying I treasure the experience. The fracture is healing.
Okay.
That even at 75 years old, your bones can heal. So, that's what happened. Petraeus. Yeah, I had a whole list of questions to ask Petraeus, but perhaps I'm carrying on too long here. I know you wanted to jump in more.
No. I'm listening, and I'm attempting to understand that anyone who buys a ticket to any of these events, there's no guarantee that you can enter. In the back of the one for the Petraeus, so I think it was blank, but it probably said anyone can enter except Ray McGovern.
A dubious distinction. As I reflected on it, Mort.
Okay. All right. It's not a good sign for freedom of speech or attempting to find out the truth on issues. I was just wondering responses to that. Maybe what one could do is get a bunch of these Ray McGovern face masks, and hundreds of us go and attempt to attend, one of these things, and let's see what happens. How close are we to the system really blowing up? I mean, I remember being in the city when we tried to shut down the war before it started, and I looked in the face of a policeman, but thousands of us down there, and I was face to face with the guy at the block, with the wooden horses, and I said, "Whose police are you, ours or the mayor's?"
Yeah.
I mean, whose police are they? Really? What the hell's going on? And so someone like you who has, served the country for many years, for them to do that to you is a warning to the rest of us, poor souls who want the government to do the right thing. Now, can you comment on what your chances are on beating this. I remember seeing you with your back towards Hillary Clinton, another great leader of ours, and they dragged you out of there. Were you able to? What was the penalty on that one?
Well, we learned that the State Department security investigated me. Or they did a full, kind of investigation, and they found out that I was an anti-war activist. Okay? And on that basis, State Department issued a bolo against me. Now, I know that you've been in the thick of things, Mark, but I don't know if you know what a bolo is.
No.
Okay. If you know those wanted posters that you have up in post offices?
Yeah.
Well, they put out one of those. Bolo means be on the lookout. Seriously.
You were boloed.
Right. I was over to find out I was boloed. Yeah.
Right.
Anyhow, we got this correspondence from the State Department security people, and they said, he has quizzed people like Donald Rumsfeld, and he has done all manner of embarrassing things and speaking out against U.S. policy.
Yeah, what did he think he is?
Even though we have no evidence of any criminal activity, we're going to bolo him, which means that if he approaches any State Department facility or any place where the Secretary is, be on the lookout and immediately stop him, interrogate him, and report his presence to State Department Operations Center. Good. So when we found out that was issued, we wanted to make sure that it got unissued because the gross violation of my First Amendment rights, of course. And finally, the State Department said, we'll just unbolo that. We'll disbolo it or unbolo it. And then the lawyer, the nonprofit legal team that's helping me, wonderful people, they said, well, wait a second, that's not enough. We want to make sure you haven't shared it with everybody and his brother and the 18,000 security services that now exist in this country. And State Department did their best to make sure that was not the case, but lo and behold, it was the equivalent of a bolo that I experienced on the 30th of October on the steps or in the vestibule of the 92nd Street Y. So, never know, if you speak out, people don't like that, and particularly Petraeus, he wanted to prevent himself from being asked a question such as I asked Donald Rumsfeld in Atlanta back in May of 2006. That ended up in a 4-minute debate, and my luck was that time, Mort, that nothing else happened in the whole world that day. Nothing else happened. And this is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. CNN, C-SPAN were rolling, and so all the cable and network TV channels knew that there would be competition, and here was Rumsfeld being forced to admit that he lied in the first instance. They did fact check, and so I was all over the TV channels that particular night. It was the 4th of May. Now, that's not to say it was a benign kind of... Paul is on. Here she comes, Mr. McGovern, how long have you had this animus toward the Secretary of Defense? Animus? This is a question. Next question. Why did you follow him down to Atlanta? I said, I didn't follow him down. I was giving a speech that night. He followed me down. Went down from there. So, and of course, there wasn't a word of my arrest that I know of in any of the so-called mainstream papers or wire services. Not that I'm any, big shot or anything like that, but you would think that a Petraeus event like that, if only his name recognition would warrant it, something might have been at least reported. This crazy fellow wanted to ask Petraeus if he knows now. He asked very early, right when Iraq was starting, he asked a distinguished newspaper guy, he said, now, please, tell me how this thing ends, will you? No. Okay, Dave, it's 10 years later. We know how this thing ends. Why did you pretend, David Petraeus, that you had trained up these Iraqi forces to take over in an efficient manner, that we had given them billions of dollars of equipment, and they were all set to take over, the Afghans too. And you know what happened earlier this year, Dave, that those 4 divisions in northern Iraq, highly trained by you and highly equipped by the U.S. government, as soon as a couple of AK-47 rifle shots went their way from this ISIL thing, they ran away. Well, I don't want to exaggerate more. They didn't all run away. The officers took helicopters away.
Oh.
Flew south.
Yeah, where'd they get the helicopters from?
And guess what? They left their tanks, their armored personnel carrier, and the artillery behind. So what do we have to do? Well, we sent our fighter bombers to destroy all this equipment, lest they get into the hands of ISIL. So I ask you, who profits from all this? Well, the folks that sold $1 billion worth of equipment to Iraqi forces in the first place, and the ones that made the planes and the ammunition to destroy them in the second place, so that they would fall into hostile hands. And now the ones that will make new ones to replace all that stuff to a tune of billions of dollars that we're doing now for the new Iraqi government. And so, is this a great country or what? I mean, this is a self-licking ice cream cone, as we used to say in the Bronx.
That's nice. I never heard that before.
Well, you're from Brooklyn. You're from, an undeveloped part of
Right.
Bronx, we had these very erudite expressions like self-licking ice cream cone.
That's a good...
And if you think about what the military is doing there, that's exactly the expression that seems to be apt, at least in my view.
Oh, okay. Okay, for those who are tuning in late, I'm speaking with Ray McGovern, former CIA analyst and member of Tell the Word. And one of the names you had mentioned, Paul Azan. Paul Azan, like many of the others in the media, actively supported the war against Iraq. And when anyone criticized it, I believe she went so far as to question their patriotism.
Oh, sure. Well, I was aware of all that. And, after I had this 4-minute debate with Rumsfeld, I'm walking out of the auditorium, and my cell phone rings. And this very officious woman on the end of the phone says, Mr. McGovern, I understand you're causing a lot of disruption here in Atlanta, and Paula wants to have you on her show.
Oh.
Now, I don't watch television more, but I knew the Paula's on and stuff. But I figured I'd have some fun, so I said, Paula who? Does she run the community radio here in Atlanta? Who's Paula? Paula who? And I get to say, well, Paula's on.
Yeah.
I said, oh, who is she? Tell me who she is. Oh, she's an anchor. She's an anchor.
Right, she's an anchor, is right.
So I said, well, have her give me a call. I'll talk to anybody. But what, I know what an anchor is. Yeah, sure. Yeah, have her give me a call. So that word probably got back that I was very disrespectful to Paul Azan. And after she checked with the administration and got her marching orders, her first question to me, as I've already said, was, how long have you had this animus towards Secretary of Defense, Mr. McGovern? So that's how bad it is, Mort, but you know all that.
Well, you ever watch Steve Colbert?
I watch him every now and then.
Occasionally he has a great question, like, how long have you hated this country?
Yeah, right. Well, I remember McCarthy days. I remember the heated discussions in my father's and mother's living room about McCarthy, and it sends shivers up the back of my neck here to think that we're back in that kind of culture, and there's no one to ask, have you no shame, Senator? Have you finally no shame?
It's like waking up in the middle of a game and finding out it's fixed.
Yeah.
The game's fixed. The person they got presenting the questions is part of the problem, and the other one is the criminal.
Yeah.
Okay, and there you are. You're sort of like the picture I'm getting is Snow White. You know, an innocent caught in the crosshairs of a corrupt administration and a corrupt press corps.
Yeah.
All right, and they're asking the questions, and then they're challenging anybody like you who has the nerve to criticize the direction the country's going in. Did you get any feedback on how Petraeus did at the 92nd Street? Why did they get up and cheer him or anything?
Well, you know, Mort, that's the interesting thing. All the people who are with me, for whom this same person had bought tickets, were excluded from going.
They were all stopped?
Yeah, they were all stopped.
Well, that's pretty good. They're pretty good in that. That's perfection.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's very efficient. You know, the trains are running on time too, and they only follow orders these
right,
days.
No questions. Yeah, we have to see the questions before we let you in.
Well, yeah, so...
Did you should have put on some sort of stormtrooper's uniform, then they might have let you in.
You know, if you put a kind of a comic digression, because we do need to keep our senses of humor here. When you talked about the game being fixed, right? Well, I played for Fordham, right? I played a game against NYU. This is 1961, and NYU had this incredible high scorer. He was terrific, you know. He averaged about 25 points a game, and I wasn't much at shooting, but I was pretty good, pretty tenacious on defense. Okay, so my job was to keep this guy from scoring a lot of points, and he only scored 11 points, Mort. And man, I emerged as some sort of hero. Okay, now guess what? 5 years later, I'm reading the New York Times, and it turns out that the game was fixed. This guy was shaving points. So my great glory in having held him to 11 points was probably not all due to my tenacious defensive acumen. It was due to him shaving points. And I don't spread that around. Anybody who's tuning in, please don't tell the rest of my friends at Fordham that that's the way it turned out. But, you know, when they fixed the game in the middle, just as you've been telling here, you know, that's not kosher, so to speak, not only in basketball, but certainly not when hundreds of thousands of lives are being wasted.
Yeah, in the basketball fixing, there was a penalty. What happened to those guys?
Well, actually, those guys got off pretty light. You're thinking probably a couple of years earlier with the CCNY crowd there, Nat Holman and all those guys. I don't really remember exactly what happened, but it was more in the case of, oh, darn, look what happened. These guys were shaving points. I don't think anything really bad happened.
Okay, but I think with CCNY, some of them, they were thrown off the teams. They weren't allowed to play.
That's right. That was about a decade earlier.
Yeah, but they don't do that in politics.
No, actually, they give you a presidential medal of freedom.
Right, you step up to the plate, you become the cleanup hitter. I mean, all right. How are we supposed to respond to a government that you know, doesn't allow questioning of the you know, of what's taking place? How long can we continue doing that without disintegrating as a you know? Not, you know, can we still use the word democracy?
Well, you know, I'm thinking of the Germans, and I think they give us a very excellent negative example. You know, I'm old enough to remember the war. I was born 1 week before it started, the war. Okay. For listeners, we're talking the Second World War, okay? I was born a week before Hitler sent his troops into Poland and started World War II. But, you know, so I don't remember the first 3 years or so, but I remember right after that, I remember the Nuremberg Tribunal. I remember what happened, you know, where people took this sort of thing seriously. And I also remember what the Germans did not do in terms of rising up against the indignities to which they were subjected. I have lived in Germany for 5 years, more in the 60s and then again in the 70s. And I have some very good German friends, but no one has been able to explain to me why it was that the Germans, the most highly educated, the most highly cultivated, arguably, people in Western Europe, why they sat still. Why their churches, for example, why the Catholic Church, why the Lutheran Church could not find their voice when Hitler started his atrocities. One thing people don't understand or realize is that when Hitler came into power, one of the first things he did, Mort, was to make sure that there was a pastor in every church in Germany, whether it was Lutheran, whether it was Catholic. And when people asked, you know, why that was, well, the answer came down loud and clear. He saw that as a force of stability for his regime, and unconscionably, unfortunately, extremely sadly, that was the case, okay? So, what am I saying here? I'm saying that the Germans were obedient as long as nobody was beating them up or nobody was taking them off to a concentration camp. They were willing to sort of just sit by and not get themselves in trouble by getting involved. One of the people who spoke to this was a young lawyer. His name was Raymond Pretzel, but he goes by the author name of Sebastian Hafner. He was very, very popular in post-war Germany. Now, he wrote a novel. Actually, it wasn't a novel. It was his diary in Berlin in 1933 when all hell was breaking loose, okay? And what he says in that novel, and this is just a small quote, he said, when the Reichstag, the German parliament, was burned, you know, that was Berlin's equivalent of the attacks of 9/11. This is what Raymond Pretzel says, quote, I do not see that anyone can blame the majority of Germans who, in 1933, believed that the Reichstag fire was the work of communists, what the government said, the Nazis said. Who can blame them? What one can blame them for, and what shows their terrible collective weakness of character, is that settled the matter. With sheepish submissiveness, the German people accepted that as a result of the fire, each one of them lost what little personal freedom and dignity was guaranteed to them by the Constitution, as though it followed as a necessary consequence. If the communists burned down the Reichstag, okay, read, if the terrorists burned down the Twin Towers, okay, if the communists burned down the Reichstag, it was perfectly in order that the government took, quote, decisive measures, end quote. From now on, one's telephone would be tapped, one's letters would be opened, one's desk might be broken into, and that was okay, end quote. That's page 121, 122 of Defying Hitler, the title that his children gave to his notes taken in 1933. Now, that's a chilling thing, you know, because if you substitute Americans for Germans, terrorists for communists, September 11th for 1933, and if you give some thought where we might be headed, you know, well, you know, Dr. King, one of everyone's prophets, he warned that there is such a thing as being too late. Okay, and we're at that point now. And so, what's my observation? Well, it's twofold. If you're young, you need to, number one, educate yourself. Get yourself on the web, find out where you can find out what's really going on, and then see if you're the kind of American that will be a winter soldier, okay, and not just a acquiescent German, okay? Now, if you're old, if you're like me, okay, I'm 75. Now, what I learned when I got beat up from simply standing and turning my back on Hillary Clinton was that Americans care when old folks get beat up. That came in the form of hundreds of thousands of emails and telephone calls to the State Department saying, hey, don't beat up old guys like the government, okay? I was only 71 then, all right? Now, what's the point here? I'm saying that we old people have a big advantage, and that is that Americans tend to dismiss young people when they get beat up. But old people, they don't like to see that. And so put your body into it. Get out in the street, whether you're young or old. They're not gonna kill you, and usually they don't break your bones. But unless we get out in the street, then Dr. King's prophecy will be all too true. There is such a thing as too late. We have to recognize that. As Cesar Chavez used to say, there aren't enough prisons to hold all of us. You know, we have to take some risks now, or else what happened in Germany is going to happen here, sure as we're talking to each other today.
Okay. Raymond, I want to thank you for being available to speak on these issues and being a witness and a participant in attempting to correct things, as opposed to those who, have better things to do, watching TV and, going out to lunch and making sure that maybe the little trivial things are taken care of. But you're talking about holding on and protecting the soul of a nation.
Well, that's what it is, and that's why programs like yours and others that give some airtime to people like me are so key, because that's the good news. The bad news is that the Fourth Estate is dead. And I say that every time I go on the air or make a lecture. In my 51 years now of experience here in Washington, I've seen a lot of change, but there's one change that dwarfs all the others in significance, and that is that we no longer have a free press. That's big. That's the Fourth Estate dead. Not moribund anymore, just dead. Now, the good news is there's a Fifth Estate, and you're part of that, Mort. And everybody else who lets people get on and tell the truth, they're part of it. And you know what the good news is? The young people don't care about the Fourth Estate. Young people don't read the New York Times or the Washington Post. They are on the web, and it's our job to point them to the right websites so they can find out what's going on, because there is such a thing as too late.
All right, Ray, I wish you well in your recovery and in your oncoming confrontation with the justice system. And I hope there's going to be no end to the news that you will continue to make to attempt to awaken the rest of us up.
Well, thanks, Mort. And, I hope that they don't get thrown in jail for a long time, because it's hard to conduct interviews with you from...
I've done interviews from inside prison. I had Phil Berrigan.
One of my favorites, yeah.
Oh, he was great. And I had his wife on, and I had his daughter on. Those are the ones that, it's like a little candle. The flame is still there.
Oh, they inspire me. As a matter of fact, I don't know if we have another minute, but yes. I was staying at the Catholic Worker over the weekend. Just this past weekend, I was giving a talk at the Schiller Institute. And on the wall of the room where I stayed, they're not real hush surrounding, mind you, but you get a pretty good view of life. And here's a little poem that was written by Dan Berrigan, and it doesn't take very long if you have one more minute.
I do.
It's called Some, okay? S-O-M-E. Here it goes. Some stood up once and sat down. Some walked a mile and walked away. Some stood up twice, then sat down. I've had it, they said. Some walked 2 miles, then walked away. It's too much, they cried. Some stood and stood and stood. They were taken for fools. They were taken for being taken in. Some walked and walked and walked. They walked the earth. They walked the waters. They walked the air. Why do you stand, they were asked, and why do you walk? Because of the children, they said, and because of the heart, and because of the bread, because the cause is the heart's beat, and the children born, and there isn't bread. And you Berrigan, S.J. So, with people like that around, and people who have those kinds of things on their walls, or it's an inspiration to me. It will keep me going for as long as God lets me.
Okay, you too are an inspiration. I want to thank you for putting your life on the line for the rest of us.
Well, you're most welcome, and I think we all need to do that. And I think we're going to come out of this all right, but it's going to take all of us. It's going to take more courage.
Okay, and thank you so much for reminding us.
Most welcome. Take care now.
You take care too, Ray. Take care.